Johto has my favorite roster of Pokemon, despite being underappreciated because Johto is filled with Kanto Pokemon for some reason and because it's filled with babies. I've always loved this roster. However, the elites of Kalos heavily disagree with me. Not a single Elite Four member use any Johto Pokemon on their team, well besides Scizor, but come on, that's like half a one. On top of this, the amount of Johto Pokemon you can actually get in the Kalos region is very limited. To prove to this region that Johto Pokemon are the best Pokemon, I'm gonna beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of this game using only Johto Pokemon. If you don't know what a Nuzlocke is, it's basically a Pokemon challenge run with the following rules. If a Pokemon faints, you can't use it again and it's dead. You can only catch one Pokemon per route. Your Pokemon cannot exceed the level cap of the next gym leader. You can't use items in battle, and you must play on set move. I'll be using this exact rule set, but with the only exception of only being allowed to catch and use Johto Pokemon. Remember that subscribing is free and helps me out a ton, and let's get started. We start the game off meeting our creepy neighbors and also being forced to choose a Pokemon non-native to Johto, which I fittingly named Poopface, but luckily my Pokemon XY garden grows save files that also give you a level 5 Sunkern to start off the game with, so we're not completely stuck here. We have a rival battle to start off the game, and even though I am using a Sunkern, the literal worst Pokemon ever, the battle is still pretty easy due to my type advantage. Normally, you just head straight to your mom who gives you an item you'll never use, which I did do, but instead of blasting through the Zigzagoon with your overpowered starter, I actually had to train up my Sunkern to level 8 to learn Grass Whistle in order to ensure a safe victory, which is kinda sad, but it is what it is. Anyway, after fighting my way through the forest, I arrive in Sandstone City where I can box Poopface and get my next encounter on Route 22, which is a Dunsparce. But when I was recording, my power went out and corrupted the video file, so instead you get this footage of me riding a Skiddo. There aren't any more encounters before the first gym, so after a bit of training, I just went ahead and challenged Viola. I lead with Sunkern, which might seem risky because grass is weak to bug, but Viola's Surskit doesn't even know any bug type moves, so there isn't really a risk there. I use the strategy of putting Surskit to sleep and getting in chip damage with Mega Drains and Leech Seed, which causes Viola to use her potion and takes out Surskit. Vivian comes out next, and I switch into Dunsparce and get hit with Infestation, but Dunsparce is able to tank the damage from both that and Vivian's tackles and is able to take her out with a couple rollouts, and just like that, that's our first badge. After that, I can head to Route 4 to get our next encounter, which is a Ladybug who I train up a bit before heading to Lumiose and meeting Professor Sycamore, who instantly challenges me to a battle. I was kinda worried about this one because of Charmander, who can inflict Stab, which is when a Pokemon moves are stronger due to it being the same type as the move it used. Super effective damage against most of my team, but it ended up being fine. I tried to use Ladybug to beat Bulbasaur, but since Ladybug really sucks, I had to use Dunsparce to finish him off. Squirtle came out next, who I took out with Sunkern, and then I switched back to Dunsparce after a Leech Seed to take out Charmander. After that, I'm forced to pick yet another non-Johto Pokemon, so I picked the objectively best Kanto starter and named him Dog Poop before boxing him and heading to Route 5, where disaster struck. See, you have a rival battle on this route against Tierno, who I completely forgot had a swords dancing Corphish. After missing a Supersonic with Ladybug and wasting a turn to swap to Sunkern, he was able to use 2 swords dances which got him to +4 attack, and he was able to one-tap Sunkern with a single Vice Grip. Is this the stupidest death I've ever had in a Nuzlocke? Probably not, but it is a stupid one. Oops. I was able to bring in Dunsparce, who was barely able to survive 2 Vice Grips and take out Corphish with a few pursuits. I can't believe I almost wiped to Tierno. Not all hope is lost, however, because we can catch our next encounter, Sentret, on Route 6. After doing the Furfur puzzle in literally 20 seconds, I have no idea how I was stuck on that when I was little. I watched fireworks during the day with one of the 4 rivals that have 0 character development, and then grab the Pokeflute and head down to the Snorlax, blocking the way to Route 7, which you're usually supposed to fight or catch, but I just ran away using Dunsparce's ability, even though that doesn't really make any sense. Now I can get my next encounter on Route 7, and I can either get a Smeargle or a Hoppip, and I'm kinda able to pick one because you can only get Hoppip from hordes. I picked Hoppip because Jumpluff is pretty fast and Smeargle kinda sucks, so that's my next teammate. After some training, I headed towards Ambret Town where Sentret evolved into Furret, and after a fight against my rivals, and after arriving there, I talked to the weird scientist dudes and then headed to Glittering Cave. I eventually reached Team Flare's weird camp thingy, and I was actually somehow under-leveled here, which is something that I don't think has ever happened to me in this game. Anyway, Ladybug evolves, and the Team Flare grunts are pretty trivial, so I pick up the Jaw Fossil and then head back to Ambret, where I turn it into yet another forced, I think, non-Johto Pokemon, so I name him P-Face and send him to the box. After that, I was pretty free to head to Salage City, where Hoppip evolved and finally learned a grass type move on the way. Just past the city I can get my next encounter, which unlike the previous one, I can't manipulate to get what I want, and it's between Snubbull and Houndour. I really want Houndour, but he's a pretty rare spawn. There's not much else to do, so... and I actually got Houndour. I was super shocked because Snubbull is so much more common, but I'm really not complaining. He doesn't know a single fire type move for some reason though, and he won't learn one until level 30, but at least he evolves before the level cap, and I have a pretty strong Pokemon for this early in the game. Anyway, now it's time to face Grant. However, there's another threat before him. Rising Star Didier. That's a really weird name. He's just a regular gym trainer, but you can't avoid him, and he has a super strong Relicanth. I was able to take out his Dwebble with an Ancient Power, and put his Relicanth to sleep with Yawn, but he did the same for me. I switched into Ledian to use Mach Punch and Infestation, but then he woke up and absolutely slimed out Ledian with a Rock Tomb. I sent back in Dunsparce, who barely woke up in time to use another Yawn and put Relicanth back to sleep, and then was able to switch to Skiploom and use Bullet Seed to knock him out. I could have just done that anyway and saved Ledian, but RIP. Now with that out of the way, we need to deal with Grant himself. I leveled my team to the level cap and Houndour evolved into Houndoom, but we're still in a very bad position. I would use Skiploom for super effective damage, but he's also part flying type, meaning he takes super effective damage from Grant's rock type moves. Also, Grant's Amora is part ice type and can inflict super effective damage to both sides of Skiploom's typing. In short, Skiploom's gonna be useless here. I do have Yawn on Dunsparce though, which would allow for free turns while Grant's Pokemon sleep, and half my team is able to input super effective damage to Amora and Tyrunt using the Rock Smash TM I picked up in Amber Town, so we'll just have to see how this goes. I lead with Dunsparce, and my hope here is that Amora doesn't go for Thunder Wave so that Tyrunt can't use a Paraflinch method on Dunsparce when I try to put him to sleep. But unfortunately, after I get my Yawn in, I do get paralyzed. Oh well. I try to get in some chip with strength before Amora falls asleep, but Dunsparce ends up getting fully paralyzed after tanking a takedown. Oh well, once again. I switch in Furret while Amora sleeps for his first turn, and I'm able to fire off a critical hit stab strength for what I think is a 180 base power move, which does decent damage, and Amora sleeps for another turn. I then go for a Rock Smash on the next turn, which knocks out Amora. Tyrunt comes in next, and I considered my previous strategy of bringing in Dunsparce to put him to sleep, and decide on abandoning it and just continuing attacking with Furret. It wasn't worth the risk of Dunsparce dying to Paraflinch, and Tyrunt doesn't have anything that can hit Furret for more than neutral damage. My first Rock Smash does okay damage, and I'm able to actually get the lucky defense drop. Tyrunt retaliates with a Rock Tomb, which drops Furret's speed, but she doesn't take too much damage. Another Rock Tomb brings Tyrunt into the yellow as he retaliates with a surprisingly weak bite. Grant then uses a potion, but due to the defense drops, another Rock Smash brings Tyrunt back to half health. The battle is basically won here. All I have to do is outspeed and hit another Rock Smash and Tyrunt goes down. There's our second badge. Pretty cool for its sweep, I guess. With that literal rock wall out of the way, we can continue down to Geocinch Town, with Skiploom evolving into his final form on the way, fight Karina for the first time, and make our way to Reflection Cave where our next encounter awaits, which is Wobbuffet. Despite being a bit of a pain to catch, she'll actually be a lot more helpful than you'd imagine. The rest of Reflection Cave goes swimmingly, and we soon arrive in Shalor City. We can run to Route 12 to catch our next encounter, which, similarly to how Smeargle and Hoppip was, I have a decision between Miltank and Mareep. This time I went with Miltank because there's another electric type encounter we can get later, and Miltank has the speed, bulk, and power my team is somewhat lacking right now. With that out of the way, we can head up to the Tower of Mastery to talk about Mega Evolution. I really wish they made this area more detailed and interesting, like each room being dedicated to each Mega Evolution or something like that. Anyway, we have a rival battle against Serena here to see who will be granted the Mega Ring, which I will never be able to use, but I guess she still wants to fight for it for some reason. Houndoom can take out both her Meowstic and Absol pretty easily, and Furret is just barely able to take out Braixen thanks to a lucky miss from Fire Spin. I really gotta take less dumb risks like this. Now it's time for Gym 3. I mainly want to use Jumpluff here thanks to the helpful flying typing he has, but that's kinda hard without any flying type moves. He doesn't learn any until level 34, and that's past the level cap. So I did some very long and confusing backtracking to Salage City to go pick up the TM for Aerial Ace, which Jumpluff can luckily learn. This helps a lot with this fight, but it doesn't make it trivial. Karina's Machoke knows Rock Tomb, which is super effective to Jumpluff's flying typing, and her ace, Hawlucha, is a fighting flying type with Flying Press, which is super effective to Jumpluff's grass typing. We'll have to bring in someone else to deal with that issue. Karina's trainers are pretty easy to beat, so let's just get into her battle. Karina leads with Mienfoo, and I lead with Jumpluff. After an annoying fake out, Jumpluff can hit with an Aerial Ace for huge damage and take an incredibly weak power up punch. Karina uses one of her potions, but Jumpluff just goes for another Aerial Ace to bring Mienfoo back down to low HP. The next turn, Jumpluff can just outspeed and hit with another Aerial Ace to bring down Mienfoo. But Choke comes out next, and another Aerial Ace cuts out most of his HP before he fires back with a Rock Tomb. I was kinda scared of this, but since it's not stab, it didn't actually do that much. I'm free to take out Machoke with another Aerial Ace on the next turn, and now Hawlucha comes out. I bring out Wobbuffet, which might seem like a weird choice, but Wobbuffet is unique in the way that she can't attack by herself, but uses moves like Counter and Mirror Coat to fire back at her opponent. Since all of Hawlucha's attacks are physical, if he attacks with enough power, Counter, which fires back double the damage dealt to the user to the opponent, as long as the damage dealt is physical, Wobbuffet would be guaranteed a successful counter and could fire back a massive attack. Wobbuffet is very beefy too, so this seems like a good strategy. Hawlucha starts by setting up Hone Claws, which made me waste turns and had me scared he might just one-shot Wobbuffet, but on turn 3 he went for a Flying Press, and Wobbuffet survives and fires back with a 142 base power counter, one-shotting Hawlucha. That's badge 3. After this, we're forced into a battle where we can only use Lucario, a non-Johto Pokemon, to beat Karina so she can give us a Mega Ring we will again never use, but there isn't any way around this, so we just have to cry through the fight and absolutely sprint away from the opportunity to have Lucario join your team. Anyway, now that we can use Surf outside of battle, we can do some backtracking to get some new encounters. All the way back on Route 3, we can catch a Marill. I would have gotten an Azuro much earlier, but that's technically not a Johto Pokemon, and only its evolutions are. We can also fish up both a Chinchou and Remoraid from Azure Bay and Shalour City respectively. I decided to take Remoraid with me out of these three due to the nice coverage provided by her Ice and Psychic type moves, and boxed for it for now. There's another rival battle in front of Gym 4, but it's the exact same one as there was in the Tower of Mastery, which puts into perspective how small the gap between Gyms 3 and 4 are, but the battle itself was easy enough, and Remoraid evolved into Octillery while fighting Ramos's gym trainers. The two Pokemon I mainly wanted to use were Houndoom for Jumpluff and Weepinbell, and my own Jumpluff for Go-Go because both have moves that deal super effective damage to Ramos's team, and using Jumpluff against Go-Go would avoid the potential of Go-Go hitting Houndoom with super effective damage with Bulldoze, but by the time I got into Ramos, I'd accidentally leveled Jumpluff above the level cap because I forgot to turn off the XP share, so we're gonna have to figure something else out, but we'll get there when we get there. Ramos leads with Jumpluff, and I lead with Houndoom and go for a Fire Fang, which just misses the one-shot. Jumpluff retaliates with a surprisingly powerful Acrobatics, and Ramos heals while I go for a regular bite next turn. Jumpluff isn't in potion range next turn, so Houndoom is free to take the kill on the next turn with a Fire Fang. Go-Go comes out next, and I bring in Wobbuffet on a critical hit, speed dropping Bulldoze. Go-Go then goes for a takedown, which Wobbuffet is able to tank and counter, which just misses the kill. Keeping Wobbuffet in would risk dying to another takedown, so I swap to Miltank on a Grass Knot, which does huge damage, but Miltank does outspeed Go-Go somehow, and goes for a Body Slam which takes him out. Weepinbell came in as Ramos's final Pokemon, and I sent back in Houndoom on a weak Acid, and outspeed to take the one-shot with Fire Fang. There's badge 4. Now we can head to the Lumiose Badlands and head to the Team Flare operation taking place in the Lumiose Power Plant, and this place is pretty trivial except for the fact that I accidentally let Houndoom get sniped by a high jump kicking Scraggy, and now we have another stupid death and no fire type. Luckily, I can go grab a Slugma from Lumiose Badlands by using Rock Smash, so we'll just be super careful to keep this guy safe so we have a fire type until the end. After stopping Team Flare, we're now free to talk to a really tall dude and head to the next gym in Lumiose City. Dunsparce is going to be taking the lead for most of this gym, as he's the only member of the team with a super effective move against electric types. Clement's Amoga does have his secondary flying typing though, so it won't be completely simple. After doing the easiest quiz in all of Pokemon inside of Prism Tower, we can now fight Clement himself. He leads with Emolga and I lead with Wobbuffet, hoping to utilize the same counter strategy I used against Hawlucha, but this time Emolga has Volt Switch, which can avoid my counter. Instead though, Clement opts for an Aerial Ace, which actually ended up critting, which allows a clean one-shot from Wobbuffet. With that out of the way, Magneton comes out and I swap into Dunsparce on an electric terrain, which is pretty scary with Stab Thunderbolt on top of that. Dunsparce barely tanks one of those, and I go for Dig, which allows me to dodge another terrifying Thunderbolt and hit for critical hit quad super effective damage, but Magneton survives thanks to its ability. I'm in a pretty bad place here. I decide to switch to Miltank on a heal turn from Clement, and I get a tiny bit of chip in with Zen Headbutt before barely tanking another powered up Thunderbolt as the electric terrain wears off. I swap into Slugma, who tanks a Mirror Shot, and anticipating another setup of electric terrain, I take the opportunity to go for a risky, super effective Lava Plume. That works out and Magneton is back in the red. I swap into Wobbuffet on another heal turn and go for a Mirror Coat, which is just counter but for special moves, and tank a Thunderbolt before hitting back for huge damage, but Magneton is again saved by its ability. Now, I want to bring in Jumpluff to outspeed and get the quick kill, but Jumpluff is part flying type, so getting hit with one of these supercharged Thunderbolts will definitely kill him. I need to sacrifice Wobbuffet to get a free switch into Jumpluff. Wobbuffet was so much more useful than I ever would have imagined, and this is kind of what Nuzlocks are all about. I would never have used a Wobbuffet in a regular playthrough, but this shows that all Pokemon have potential to be strong. Wobbuffet goes down, and with her sacrifice, I'm able to bring in Jumpluff and finish off this menace of a Magneton with an Acrobatics. Heliolisk comes out as Clement's last Pokemon and hits Jumpluff with a huge damage Thunderbolt after I set up a Leech Seed, and I'm yet again in a bad spot. Nobody on my team is healthy enough to come in and tank any attacks to get the kill, so I realize yet another sacrifice must be made. Jumpluff needs to go down to allow Miltank to come in and finish off Heliolisk. I go for a Bullet Seed as Heliolisk opts for another Thunderbolt, taking down Jumpluff. This does allow Miltank to come in and hit Heliolisk with a stab body slam, which takes him down for the 5th badge. What a disastrous battle. With my team missing 2 members, I pulled Chinchou and Furret out of the box to replace my fallen soldiers, and train them up to be the same level as the rest of the members, where Chinchou evolves into Lantern and Slugma evolves into Magcargo. Next is yet another rival battle against Serena, but it ends up being pretty easy with Furret knowing the move Sucker Punch, which makes her Meowstic much less of a threat, and the other 2 being easy takedowns with Miltank and Lantern. Now we can get to our next encounter, which is a Quagsire on Route 14. This guy is going to be pretty helpful for a lot of upcoming fights with his unique typing and diverse moveset. After arriving in Laver City, which I always thought was pronounced Lavar for some reason, I get some brand new drip and start forming a plan to beat Valerie. I don't have any Pokemon with super effective moves against fairy types in my roster, and while most of her team have dual typings that I do have super effective moves for, I still want to secure at least one super effective move for her ace, Sylveon. Dunsparce is the only Pokemon I have that can learn the move Poison Jab, which I can grab from the Shalor City Pokemart after a lot of backtracking. With that out of the way and selecting the best fit members for this battle, my team is as well prepared as it can be. Valerie leads with Mawile and I lead with Magcargo. There isn't much Mawile can do here, so after she goes for a useless Iron Defense, I'm free to take the one shot with a Lava Plume. Mr. Mime comes out next, and instead of switching into Furret or Dunsparce to get super effective hits in, I decide to keep in Magcargo for now and go for some chip with Lava Plume, which actually ends up working out excellently and burning Mr. Mime, which halves her attack. I switch into Dunsparce on a heavy Psychic, and I go for a Yawn, which somehow fails? I didn't even know that could happen. With Dunsparce super low, I decide to switch into Lantern to tank some attacks while Burn Chip does its thing. A couple Psychics later, Mr. Mime is deep in the red and her light screen wears off. Anticipating a potion, I switch into Miltank to take some more attacks. After a surprisingly strong body slam, however, Mr. Mime is back in the red before retaliating with a critical hit Psychic to bring Miltank to below half. A Milk Drink on the next turn allows Miltank to tank another Psychic, and Mr. Mime finally goes down to her burn. With my answer into Sylveon now at a very low HP and the rest of my team being too weak or outmatched to come in and brute force their way through, Miltank attempts a Milk Drink which barely allows for survival against an insanely strong Dazzling Gleam, but here is where Miltank has to go down. I really hate Miltank a lot, but she was actually pretty helpful in this run. May she drink her own milk in the afterlife, I guess. Her sacrifice allows Magcargo to come in without taking damage, and over the next few turns I'm able to get in some chip with Lava Plume and a lucky burn while tanking Dazzling Gleams with pure defense. Once Sylveon was low enough to go down to burn damage in the next few turns, I switched into Furret, who after tanking a Dazzling Gleam can be switched back to bring in Quagsire, who does the same and brings out Magcargo again. After another Dazzling Gleam, Sylveon finally goes down to her burn. There is badge 6. To replace Miltank, I bring Octillery back onto the team. I'm now able to head to the Pokeball factory to kick out Team Flare, and after fighting some trivial Flare grunts and superiors, and somehow getting confused with the conveyor belt thing, I'm able to free the factory and get the Master Ball, which I of course waste on our next encounter, a Murkrow from a horde on Route 15. This little guy evolves into Honchkrow, a decently strong flying / dark type, which would be great for the next gym, which is Psychic type, but the game locks all the Dusk Stones till after fully defeating Team Flare, which is way after the 7th gym. so as a Murkrow, this guy won't be much help, but it is what it is. We eventually arrive in Dedemmill Town, and after Professor Sycamore says the name of the game, we can head to the Frost Cavern to foil yet another Team Flare plot, this time trying to steal something from this awful non-Johto native Pokemon, but after defeating them and getting flashbacks to the Lumiose power plant, we can leave the heavily injured Abomasnow sitting in the corner and grab our next encounter. I never actually knew you could pick to not catch Abomasnow. Anyway, our next encounter is a Piloswine who could be helpful at this next gym with her ice coverage for Pokemon like Sigilyph. One downside to this Pokemon is that we aren't allowed to evolve him though, because Mamoswine was introduced in Gen 4, so she'll be stuck as a moody brown fuzzy lump forever. Now we can start making our way to Anastar City and get the 7th badge, where along the way I can get a new encounter on Route 17. My two possible encounters here are a Sneasel, which I would love for the extra dark and ice backup, and would be excellent for Gym 7, or Delibird. Can you tell which one I want? Anyway, Delibird is much more common here, so unlike with my luck with Houndour, I do indeed get a Delibird. Oh well. We're not in the best place ever for Gym 7 now. With Houndoom in the grave, our only dark coverage is Sucker Punch on Furret and Murkrow, whose stats do not give me any kind of hope for any kind of sweep. We'll have to abuse the dual typings of these Pokemon to land super effective hits, and possibly just brute force it at some points. Anyway, after dealing with the gym puzzle, which was a lot easier than I remembered, we're finally able to fight for our 7th badge. Olympia leads with Sigilyph and I lead with Lantern. After a light screen setup, I connect with a Confuse Ray, which does nothing next turn, and Sigilyph is able to set up a Reflect as well. This means all form of attack will do a lot less damage than usual. A Thunderbolt does less than half, but after Sigilyph hits herself in confusion and gets smited by another Thunderbolt, Olympia goes for a potion and I'm free to hit another free Thunderbolt. Next turn, Lantern takes a Psychic and hits another Thunderbolt while the light screen wears off. Next turn, Olympia uses her last potion, and this time Thunderbolt hits much harder. After Reflect wears off and Lantern tanks another Psychic, Sigilyph finally goes down to one last Thunderbolt. Slowking comes out next, and I switch to Furret on a heavy Psychic. Another still shouldn't KO though, so I go for a Sucker Punch, but it fails as Slowking goes for a Calm Mind. This means another Psychic will kill, but I don't really have a choice here. Furret has to go down to allow a free switch into Piloswine who can hit for neutral damage, with the rest of my team not having any moves that aren't not very effective, or aren't tanky enough or too weak to come in on an attack. Furret goes for her last Sucker Punch ever to bring Slowking down to half HP and goes down to a Psychic. RIP. Furret's sacrifice brings out Piloswine, who outspeeds to hit a Strength before a Yawn. Next turn she'll fall asleep, but since she outspeeds, another Strength next turn is enough to bring down Slowking. Meowstic comes out next, and after a couple turns of sleep and tanking Meowstic's attacks, Piloswine wakes up and hits a couple Ice Fangs for what I intended to just be some decent chip damage, but Meowstic actually ends up getting frozen solid, so I get some free turns to switch into Murkrow and connect with a super effective Foul Play for the kill. Could I have played that better so Furret wouldn't have died? Probably, but at least everything worked out in the end for the most part. There is badge 7. I bring Dunsparce back onto the team now, who might I say has copious amounts of trauma now. He's been here since it was just him and Sunkern, and now every single one of his original teammates plus a couple are dead. I really gotta get better at Nuzlocks. Now we get to the part of the run I've honestly been dreading due to having to fight one of the 3 required Mega Evolution users in the game, Lysandre. Because he wants to commit terrorism, I, a 14-year-old kid, and my friends need to head down to Lysandre Labs to stop this dude from exploding the region and killing everybody except his crew. We aren't there yet, however. We first need to break into his other hideout inside a cafe in Lumiose and fight him for the first time when his team isn't fully evolved and he doesn't Mega Evolve. But this fight still isn't easy. I take down his Mienfoo with a combination of Rain Dance and Surf by Quagsire, but not before being hit with a Swords Dance charged high jump kick which brought her to low HP. Lysandre sends out Gyarados next, and I switch to Lantern who, after barely tanking 2 turns of Outrage, is able to take the kill with a critical hit quad super effective Thunderbolt. I bring up Macargo to take out his Murkrow with a couple Rock Slides, and then kept her in to tank Pyro's Dark Pulses with Recover and to hit a few more Rock Slides to get the kill. After this fight, Lysandre goes on another rant about why he wants to be a terrorist, and then sends me on a trip through his really confusing hideout filled with Team Flare members to get an elevator key to find him again. This trip is mostly easy besides the fact that I forgot Piloswine was weak to Steel somehow and sent her in against a Team Flare executive's Bisharp just to get one-shot by an Iron Head. This marks the 3rd stupid death in this Nuzlocke. Jeez. Because of this, I need to take a trip down to Frost Cavern and get the TM for Frost Breath, which I can teach to the much worse Ice-type replacement in Delibird. Delibird. After returning to the hideout and grabbing the key and heading down to see Lysandre talking to the really tall dude who flexes his super strong Pokemon and the fact that he too is a terrorist. I really don't know how he managed to get into this position. I mean, they have him in a literal cage. Anyway, I then find Lysandre talking to this really pale guy who fights me and then tells me to pick a button to see if he'll bomb Kalos or not. I pick the one to not bomb Kalos, and he says that even though Lysandre said not to bomb Kalos if I pick that one, he's just gonna do it anyway. Does anybody else think that this is an absolutely insane plot for a Pokemon game? I mean, come on, there has to be at least a few casualties in this cutscene. After flying over to Geosinge Town and taking out the Flare Grunt blocking the way to the real Lysandre hideout, we can head down and listen to yet another of Lysandre's rants, but this time he cries. We then fight again, but this time his team is fully evolved, excluding Mega Evolution. This fight goes better than I expected, to be honest. I was expecting at least one casualty, but I think I just got really lucky because Quagsire is able to take out Mienshao with a couple earthquakes because he just sets up sword stances, which would be scary if he didn't just die before attacking. Gyarados comes in next, and after tanking some attacks and getting some good chip in, I switch out Quagsire for Lantern, who can tank an Outrage, and after Gyarados hits himself in confusion, take the kill with a Thunderbolt. Pyroar comes out next, and I for some reason decide to go for an Aqua Ring instead of switching out or going for some really heavy damage with Surf, but after being brought into the red, I switch into Magcargo, who flinches 3 times in a row from Dark Pulse, a 0.8% chance, but after barely tanking those and using Recover, I can get the kill with a few Rock Slides. Honchkrow is last, but I just use the same strategy I just did for Pyroar, and the battle ends with no casualties. After that, we work together with Serena and Shauna to make our way to Xerneas through a bunch of Team Flare people. We eventually make it to the room where Xerneas is, but to my utter shock, a Houndoom randomly hits Quagsire for over half his HP with a Foul Play, which kills him. I had no idea a random Houndoom had that much raw attack power. It wasn't even super effective. Magcargo can come in and finish the fight, but with Quagsire gone and Octillery being his replacement, the final fight against Lysandre just got a lot harder. Xerneas attacks us next, and with just a few of Dunsparce's poison jabs, it's a pretty easy catch. By the way, you do have to catch Xerneas, you can't just knock it out. Now, this next Lysandre fight is very difficult because the game wants you to add Xerneas to your party and use it to beat his Mega Evolving part Dragon type Gyarados, but since Xerneas isn't a Johto Pokemon, we can't use it and are stuck with regular Pokemon to beat this super powered team. To beat this, we're gonna need strategy, sacrifices, and probably some good RNG as well. The first problem comes before the fight even really starts. Since the last thing I was doing was fighting Xerneas, Dunsparce is currently in the lead of my party, and since Lysandre leads with Mienshao, a fighting ghost type, Dunsparce is at an awful disadvantage. I need a free switch into Octillery to take out this Pokemon, so we need to make our first sacrifice of the fight already. Delibird comes out to make his debut for the first time and instantly gets slimed by a high jump kick. Let's be real, he wasn't going to be much use anyway. We're now free to bring in Octillery, who, after Mienshao goes for a sword stance, takes the kill with a critical hit Psybeam. I'm not sure if the crit was necessary for the one shot, but I'm guessing it was because the attack wasn't stab, so I guess if it didn't crit, Octillery probably would have died. That's some good luck. Pyroar comes out next, but since Octillery was still at full HP, I just decided to keep him in to tank a Hyper Voice and take the kill with a Surf. Honchkrow came out next, and I made the switch into Magcargo, who instantly got hit with a critical hit Night Slash, but now my strategy for this guy can come into play. It's literally just recover stalling. I'm gonna let Honchkrow hit Magcargo over and over while spamming recover in an attempt to have Flame Body activate and burn Honchkrow. Eventually my hopes become reality, and with Honchkrow having his attack stat cut in half and taking chip from burn, I can safely take the kill with a couple Rock Slides. Now the big guy comes out, Lysandre's Mega Gyarados. Now I need another sacrifice to get a free switch into Dunsparce. Octillery is my most logical answer to this, and after Gyarados Mega evolves, my weird gun octopus thing goes down to an Aqua Tail, RIP. With her sacrifice, I can bring in Dunsparce to go for a yawn. I want to bring in Lantern here to hit with Thunderbolts, but I need to have as many sleep turns as possible, so my plan was to let Dunsparce go down to have a free switch, and I go for a random poison jab, planning to see Dunsparce die, but Gyarados' Aqua Tail actually misses, and then poison jab poisons Gyarados. This now completely changes my strategy. Using Murkrow and Lantern, I can now bait Gyarados into using moves that are resisted or don't affect their targets by switching back and forth between the two while letting poison damage Gyarados. Then, once Gyarados is low enough, I can just take him out with a Nightshade. This strategy worked perfectly. Did I need a bit of luck? Yes, but we don't talk about that. After that crazy fight, he fully commits to being a terrorist and bombs Kalos from space. Okay, come on, it's impossible there weren't any casualties here. After boxing our fallen allies and bringing Azumarill onto the team, this is the first time in a long time we haven't had a full team, but now that pretty much the entire rest of the map has opened up, we can get a slew of new encounters. Our first new encounter comes from Terminus Cave. Here we can not only grab a Duskstone and finally evolve Murkrow into Honchkrow, but we can also catch an Ariados. I would have been able to get Pupitar here if I was playing Pokemon Y, but I picked Houndoom over Tyranitar for some reason, so oh well. The other two encounters are Shuckle and Politoed, both of which are 5% encounter rates from Rock Smash on Route 18 and Fishing on Route 19, which is past Kuraway Town, which I arrive at after some trivial rival and professor battles respectively. I gave up on recording Shuckle's capture after breaking rocks for 20 minutes and I didn't record Politoed at all, and even though they kinda suck and I won't be using them, I did indeed catch them. Ariados joined the team, but the other two stayed boxed. After arriving in the city of the final gym, Snowbell, I head straight to Route 21 to catch yet another encounter in Ursaring. With a moveset of Strength, Power Up Punch, Rest, and Snore, this guy is going to be an absolute beast. I then head down to the Lost Woods of Pokemon XY, Winding Woods, and grab another encounter I probably won't end up using, Noctowl. I then arrived in the Pokemon Village and convinced Wulfric to go do his job, and after returning to the gym and brute forcing through the puzzle with Ursaring and my raw brain power, it's officially time for the final gym battle against Wulfric. I would love to say Magcargo is going to take this one solo, but since Magcargo actually just kinda sucks, he's going to need some help to take out these guys with their dual typings. To kick off the fight, Wulfric leads with Abomasnow and I lead with Ursaring. I instantly fire off a Strength that hits Abomasnow for about half his HP before tanking an Energy Ball. With Abomasnow not being in potion range, Ursaring is free to take the kill on the next turn with another Strength. Cryogonal comes out next, and does anybody actually care about this guy? I've never seen him used in anything notable ever. Weird. Anyway, this fight is really confusing and involved a lot of actual status confusion and switching and stuff, and I played it really awfully, so we'll just end with the fact that Cryogonal fainted and nobody died. Avila comes out as Wulfric's last Pokemon, and for the first and only time ever, Magcargo actually outspeeds another Pokemon and is able to use a couple recovers and take out Avila with a single flamethrower. That's badge 8. No deaths this time. With that fight over, it's finally time for the Pokemon League. Before we get there though, we have to go through Victory Road. Aside from the dude at the entrance almost killing 2 of my Pokemon somehow, and a couple fights putting me in weird spots, it was easy enough and the path to the league was pretty easy. We can also get our last encounter of the run here, which is a Skarmory. This guy is going to be pretty helpful for the league. Speaking of which, after investing in just a few full restores and readying my final Johto team of Lantern, Azumarill, Honchkrow, Ursaring, Magcargo, and Skarmory, it's time to challenge the Elite Four. You can pick any of the 4 to fight first, and I picked who I thought would be the easiest for my team, Malva. Let's see how this goes. Malva leads with Pyroar and I lead with Azumarill. After an overall attack drop from a Noble Roar, Surf does less than half, so I decided it's worthwhile to set up a Rain Dance, which went well after tanking a Flamethrower. Even after another Noble Roar, Surf still does over half and takes the kill. Talonflame comes out next, and I send out Lantern, who completely combats both of Talonflame's typings. On the cold switch though, Lantern is hit with a Flare Blitz which burns, which would be pretty bad, but luckily burns only have your physical attack stat and not your special one, so the only real problem is the chip damage, but that's probably fine anyway. After tanking a Brave Bird, Lantern can take down Talonflame with a Thunderbolt. Torkoal comes out next, and after switching into Azumarill on an Earthquake, the rain stops. Surf still does do a lot of damage, but not enough for the one-shot. After taking the last Earthquake Azumarill can tank, the next turn Malva uses a potion as I hit another Surf. I switch into Magcargo here because it not only burns Malva's last potion, but also gives Magcargo a free switch in. Now I can get some chip in with Rock Slide before needing to switch out from an Earthquake. I bait another Earthquake into Honchkrow and then outspeed with a Night Slash to get the kill on Torkoal. This sets up the perfect matchup for me, as Chandelure comes out last and has a dual Ghost typing, meaning Honchkrow has stabbed super effective damage against it. After tanking a surprisingly strong Flamethrower, I'm able to take down Chandelure with a single critical hit Night Slash. That's one of the 4 members down. Next up is the Water type user Seabold, so let's see how this one goes. Klotzer is up first, but he won't cause much trouble due to being pretty slow and letting me outspeed to hit a critical hit Thunderbolt for the one-shot. Gyarados is up next, and even though he is super weak to electric moves, he also has Earthquake in his moveset, so that's a little scary, but Lantern can tank at least one of them, so I just go for a Thunderbolt. Gyarados just goes for a Dragon Dance though, so now we have Lantern at full HP going into Barbaracle. He goes for a Stone Edge, which could do some pretty good damage, but just ends up missing, and Lantern connects with a Confuse Ray. I go for a Thunderbolt on the next turn as Barbarkle connects with a Stone Edge for decent damage. Anticipating a heal turn, I go for another Thunderbolt that repeats on the next turn. Now Seabolt is out of heals, and I bring in Ursaring to brute force our way through the rest of Barbarkle's health bar, but after a critical hit Stone Edge on a Cold Switch, that doesn't seem like it's gonna work. I switch into Azumarill on a missed cross chop, and I'm able to tank a Stone Edge and hit back with a Surf for the kill. Starmie comes out last, and I go for a Play Rough as it sets up a light screen for about half its HP. I then switch to Honchkrow on a baited Psychic, and after barely tanking a Dazzling Gleam, hit back with a Night Slash for the kill. That's Elite Four member 2 down. The next member I decided to fight was the Dragon type user Drosna. I do have a Pokemon with stab super effective damage in Azumarill, but some of these dual typings might cause the need for help from other members. Let's see how it goes. I actually send out Ursaring to start off the battle because Drosna's lead Dragalge has the dual poison typing, which can inflict super effective damage on Azumarill. I plan to just brute force this, so I go for a Strength while Ursaring gets hit by a critical hit Sludge Bomb. Ursaring does outspeed though, so another Strength takes down Dragalge. However, Dragalge's poison point does activate, which means Ursaring is going to be pretty much out of commission for the rest of the battle. Druddigon comes out next, and I decide to conserve Azumarill for a bit later and try to take this guy out with Lantern, who I taught Ice Beam, which doesn't end up going too well after Ice Beam does less than half, and Lantern gets hit with a critical hit Dragon Tail, but the Dragon Tail actually brings out Azumarill, which essentially makes it a free switch, so thanks I guess. Druddigon goes down to a Play Rough, and Altaria comes out next. Being a flying dragon type, ice type moves do a lot of damage, so I opt for an Ice Beam instead of a Play Rough. Altaria uses Sing on the next turn, which is pretty annoying, but there isn't much she can do to Azumarill in terms of actual damage, so I kinda just have to spam buttons until Azumarill wakes up. A couple turns later, Azumarill does indeed wake up and is able to take the KO with another Ice Beam. Noivern is Drasna's last Pokemon, and for some reason the AI kept seeing Flamethrower as the best move here. This thing has Boom Burst, by the way. Well, after a couple turns of Drasna stalling with heals and Azumarill hitting Ice Beams, I make a switch into Macargo to tank a few attacks and take the kill with a Rock Slide. That's member 3 down. Time for the last Elite Four member, the Steel type user Wickstrom. He leads with Klefki and I lead with Azumarill. Klefki is going to be hard because I kinda just have to brute force my way through here due to not having any super effective moves for him, but after taking some attacks he goes down to a few Surfs. Probopass is next, and I send in Lantern, who is able to tank a Discharge and a couple Stone Edges to take the kill with 2 Surfs. Aegislash is next, and I keep in Lantern to get a tiny bit of chip, but after almost dying I decide to switch to Honchkrow. Aegislash lands a critical hit Night Slash on the switch, which does a lot of damage, but Honchkrow retaliates with one of his own critical hit Night Slashes for the kill. Scizor is up last, and I thought I'd be able to outspeed and one-shot this guy with a Fly, but somehow a neutral X-Scissor hits for over half of Honchkrow's health and kills him. I have no idea how that happened. I send in Macargo, who finishes the fight with a Flamethrower, but now we only have 5 Pokemon going into the champion. This isn't looking too good. Time for the final fight of the game, Champion Diantha. Diantha leads off with Hawlucha and he sets up Swords Dance, but I'm able to get the one-shot with a Play Rough. Aurorus is up next, and I switch into Ursaring as he sets up a Light Screen. The next turn I outspeed and am able to hit with the Hammer Arm for the second one-shot of the battle. Goojra comes out next, and I switch back to Azumarill on a baited Focus Blast, and then the AI goes for Fire Blast for some reason, which Azumarill obviously tanks, and I go for the third one-shot of the battle with another Play Rough. Gourgeist is next, and I send in Macargo, who after having to tank some annoying ghost type stuff, is able to get yet another one-shot with Flamethrower. Tyrantrum is second to last, and I send back in Azumarill, who gets hit with a critical hit Earthquake. I decide it's worth the risk to go for a Play Rough, but it doesn't one-shot. However, Tyrantrum misses his next attack, which gives Azumarill a free turn to take the kill with one more Play Rough. Diantha's Mega Gardevoir is last, and after she traces Azumarill's huge power, which was a huge oversight on my end, we just have to throw everything we have at it. A critical hit Moonblast instantly kills Azumarill, so I switch into Skarmory hoping to hit some super effective hits with Night Slash, but he's instantly killed by a Thunderbolt. I send in Lantern, who gets hit with a Moonblast, but is able to fire off an Ice Beam, which gets a very lucky freeze. This allows me to get Gardevoir into the red with some Thunderbolts, but Diantha uses a full restore and Lantern is killed with another Moonblast. Macargo comes out and I try to go for a recover, but he is instantly killed by a Psychic. My last Pokemon is Ursaring, and I'm pretty confident this is where the run ends. I send in Ursaring, who takes a Moonblast and then just takes out Gardevoir with a strength. That is not what I expected at all, but with that, we can head to the Hall of Fame and officially become the Pokemon League champion. I think this proves the status of Johto Pokemon in Kalos. With that, we have officially beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon X using only Johto Pokemon. Thanks for watching to the end. This video took a lot of effort to make, and if you enjoyed, the best way to support the channel and see more stuff like this is by subscribing and liking, and that helps me out a lot, so consider that stuff. Thanks for watching.